What's happening in the canine industry? For all the latest news, views, and expert opinions, stay right here for the Canine Paradigm. You'll hear from industry leaders, experts, doyens of the industry, learned colleagues, movers and shakers, and the odd randy guest. Get the latest insights and expert advice from both here and abroad from the people in the know. Now, here are your hosts, Glenn Cook and Pat Stewart. And I'm Lofty Fulton, and I'm out of here.
Glenda?
Yes.
We have to do a new ad.
We do.
It's a solemn time. Our long-time sponsor of the show, George Kittredge,
Yes.
very, very sadly passed away. And we formerly used to advertise for him his Rowdy Hound boxes.
We did.
So we don't actually know what's happened with Rowdy Hound boxes. You know anything about that?
I looked at the website. It said that they're recalibrating since their founder and boss has passed. But nonetheless, I think that you and I want to honour the memory of George Kittredge anyway. He was a friend to both of us, a hell of a good guy, and he supported us almost immediately. He was on board through and through, and I just don't want any of us to forget George. He was a terrific human being.
So we intend to continue to advertise Rowdy Hound, even though we don't know what's going on with them, in the hopes that they keep going, and that can be a bit of George's legacy that we're able to continue to promote.
I hope so.
In checking it out, we had a look to see, because we're not real good with the sponsorship. So we had a look to see who's actually paying for sponsorship. And we have a list of people to tell you that we support. And the first is our sugar mama, Barbara de Groot.
She's been with us from the start as well. Barbara's been an absolute staple in our...
She's a gem.
She is a gem.
She has a business.
She does. From the Heart Dog Training.
From the Heart Dog Training.
Yeah.
You can check it out. But she supports us as much and more than anybody ever has. So we appreciate you very much, Barbara. Another person who's supported us from the start.
The Einzelwiener.
Einzelwiener.
The Bullfed.
The Bullfed.
Yep.
It's where I get all my stuff.
Yeah.
It is, truly. It's where I get all my dog gear. If I need something, Jason's my first point of call. I don't use his shit website. He has a website. It's dog shit. I just message him directly. You guys probably should use his shit website, but I don't.
Yeah, because you don't want to message him directly and get his grumpy ire of the day.
Yeah, but do it. Get all your dog stuff from Jason. He's got everything you need. He's got all the shit that you need to train a dog for realty.
Everybody who comes to seminars and looks at meals and asks me meals questions, ask Jason.
Yeah.
Jason can point you in the right direction for getting the meal that's best suited for you.
I really like his leashes. I'm a big fan of his leash pack. That's why I sort of convinced him to do it. But anyway, get your stuff from Einzelwiener.
Yep.
Do you know who has a fantastic website and ships internationally?
My wife?
Your wife,
Yeah.
Canine Pharmaceuticals.
I couldn't imagine her not having a good website, how much of a perfectionist she is.
Well, the products are amazing. My dog merely being alive is a walking testimonial to that. My dog, who I've retired numerous times and has come out of retirement when I've managed to get his body back to healthy, and a big part of that is related to Canine Pharmaceuticals. So check it out, everybody.
I could say so many nice and biased things about Canine Pharmaceuticals and my wife, but what I will say is ignore me. Just look at testimonials. The testimonials speak for themselves. That's where the field trials are working. What makes Narelle's day, and mine as well, is when people are emailing in and sending messages of, well, primarily people have had no hope in the past because just everything that they were trying wasn't working, and now it is. And that is the testament that something is actually really working. And the other thing which I will add, one of the things that Narelle's told me in the past is dogs are incapable of understanding the placebo effect.
Oh, that's a good point.
So you can fake it on a human, but you can't fake it on a dog.
I never thought about that before. That's actually a really good point.
Well, my wife's actually a very smart person.
There you go.
So she's told me that humans are subject to the placebo effect where dogs are not. So it either works or it doesn't on dogs.
There you go. That makes total sense.
Yep.
There's one other person who puts a fair amount of work into this show.
Yeah.
It's me.
Yeah. Funny about that.
And I have a digital product that you can buy. If you go to my website, seriousdogbusiness.com, right now I've got 2 courses available to you. The Overview, which is a small course where you could learn how I teach.
Yep.
But the other one is the Wave Tops, which is a bigger course. It's everything I know about dog training. Well, it's not everything. It's a lot of what I know about dog training.
Yeah,
check it
terrific.
out.
Yeah.
$500 dues. That's all it's going to cost you.
I recommend it when people are saying, what do I do? How do I get in the industry? I recommend them to your course.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks, sir. All right, on with the show. Welcome back to the Canine Paradigm. I'm your host, Pat Stewart. I'm joined today by my co-host, Glenn Cook.
We're here after we just did an update on 3i Atlas.
Yep, we've been back and forth about it. We know all about it. We can't tell anybody. We know the secrets.
It's got to be locked down. It's got to be shut down.
We don't know shit. We wish we did, but we don't know
That's
anything.
pretty much it. We don't know nothing.
That's sort of largely true across the board. We don't know shit.
Yep.
But we're going to talk for an hour anyway. We do have a topic. We're going to talk about the experience of the dog in training.
Yeah, I think that's a good topic.
Yeah. And I think the observation of the outcomes in training and weighing that against the experience of the dog.
It's a good topic from my point of view, and I'll speak only from my point of view. I think it's a good topic because there is a lot of, I would say, constructive and also critical criticism from people about each other when people are doing those reaction videos, when people are looking at other people's work, when people are talking about what people are doing as far as, are you suitable or qualified to be a dog trainer? There's times where I have looked at other people's work and I've been critical of it, but it's also like lightning in a bottle sometimes as well. Sometimes what you're watching can't give you the entire episode or the story or the backstory about what's actually going on. However, there are times when you're experienced and you know that you're looking at bad work. You can see that what's actually going on isn't indicative of a good outcome for the dog. You can see that the productivity of what the dog should be doing isn't all that good. You can also see that the dog isn't happy with what it's doing as well. It's not forming a connection or a bond with the handler or the trainer or whoever it's with. And that's sort of a telltale sign immediately. That gives you an indication of this dog just doesn't enjoy this work. It's not actually learning anything. All it's doing is just keeping itself from getting punished. These are topics that you and I have talked about before. And I think branching off slightly, this is where people make a concern about the use of punishment. But I would more tie that into the use of confusion. And that's what people are doing, is they're confusing the dog because they actually don't really know what they're doing themselves. That happens in human training as well. Teachers teaching children, teachers teaching adults, people learning from one another. I've given a story about my old BJJ coach telling me not to teach a student because I was fucking it up. And he said, you got no place. He said it nicely, but he said, don't teach people if you don't understand the lesson yourself. He was 100% correct. And I have tried to impart that with anybody that I'm teaching as well. I've tried to say to people learning about dog training, be interested, gather information, learn, mentor, shadow, do whatever you need to do, but don't start teaching a student anything until you actually intimately know it well yourself. Because it reminds me of an old math teacher I had when I was in primary school who I didn't learn anything the entire year from her because I was fucking terrified of her. She was a cruel, horrible, manipulative, narcissistic shit of a person. I don't think she liked children. I think she just didn't like life much herself. And that was in the days where teachers could hit kids. So anytime you failed at anything, she'd just belt you with a ruler. If you put a foot out of place, like seriously, she'd come over with a fucking ruler and just smack you across the hands or anywhere she could get you. If you cried, she'd hit you with a ruler, like to stop you crying. I don't know how that's supposed to work in theory, but anyway, she thought it did. So I understand quite well what abuse is. Like these days, she'd be in jail. She'd be thrown in jail. She'd lose her teaching job. She wouldn't have a rock to hide under. She'd be literally called out in every fucking sector for doing it. She's probably dead now, well and truly. But the reality is, mate, is I didn't learn anything that entire year. I was too scared to ask her. Because anytime you made an attempt to do something but got it wrong, you lived in fear of getting the ruler. And I see people doing training and people chastising the outcomes of what they're seeing online. I get it sometimes when I'm watching some of the videos or I'm seeing it for myself. Like if I come across something and think, oh, that's terrible training, you can just tell the student is living in fear of the lesson. So again, circling back to my point, this is where people say punishment doesn't work. I don't like punishment. But you're not looking at punishment. You're not looking at the effectiveness of punishment where it says, hey, you're on the wrong track. And because you continually get back on this track, this is what happens as a consequence. Get back on the right track and you can avoid this altogether. And you actually incrementally teach your student how to understand that, how to have a relationship with that and how to use punishment effectively in order to get back to learning and feeling good about the lesson itself. What they're looking at and what they're constructing in their mind as punishment is actually abuse, where the student has no control over it and doesn't feel like they've got any control over it. It's got so far away from being constructive that the student now has lost all hope in what they're actually trying to do. I intimately understand that because that reiteration of my childhood story is traumatic. I still have dreams of that sometimes. The teacher's name was Miss Jones. I still remember Miss Jones fucking coming at me with a ruler, and I wake up in a fucking hot sweat sometimes. Like, it is something that I think about because she gave me no hope. She didn't just do it to me. She did it with any students other than her favorites, you know, like the people who were getting A's and high B's, who were also bootlickers as students as well. Those were the people that curried favor with her. Their reward was not getting the ruler. So yes, I understand those type of things. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about that because I think when people are viewing other people's work, sometimes the critiques that they're giving them are quite alarmingly over the top. And sometimes the people who are giving critiques are in no place to give critiques as well because they're fucking idiots. And that's just to put it solid. I mean, I've seen people critiquing other people's work before. Even though they can train a dog, they're not much of a human being themselves. They're actually, sometimes they're some of the worst of us.
That's the part that's worth talking about is that in terms of critiquing other people's work, especially when we're looking at it online, I think that it's really difficult to measure anything, you know, especially when we're dealing in the sort of pet dog reactivity sort of space, you know, or the aggressive dog case kind of things. Because, yeah, sometimes we end up with before and after comparison type videos, that kind of thing. But for the most part, we as the observer, you know, somebody puts up a video of a client dog that they're working with, and maybe there's 10 videos in their stories or you know, their social media or whatever, and we see the dog go from whatever it was when it arrived to whatever it is they're calling success at the end, and they've documented that all the way through. I think one of the issues with that kind of thing is, like, first of all, the language and the way that people are going to present themselves typically when they're doing that kind of content is for their audience, and their audience, you know, if they're good at business, their audience is the people that they are looking to turn into customers, not other dog trainers. And so I think one of the things, the first problem that we often see when dog trainers are critiquing the work of others online or via just videos that they see or whatever, I think that the problem is, first of all, I see a lot of people sort of hammering down on the language people use or the way that they describe something, or, you know, the specifics of what they're talking about, and really the way that they're trying to give the person feedback or have the conversation is in terms of like a peer-to-peer conversation. And the reality is that as dog trainers, like if you've got a dog training business and you're looking to garner more clients, you're not having a peer-to-peer conversation with that stuff. You're having a one-to-many conversation where you're an individual with a high level of expertise having to choose your language and choose what you show in order to show that to people who don't have the skill set that you have. Like, the whole point of showing it is to show, look, I have this skill set and I am able to impart it into the dog. We constantly talk about that, right? Like, we say, there's dog trainers that will say, oh, there's no point talking quadrants with a random pet dog owner, or the random pet dog owner doesn't need to fully understand classical conditioning in all of its details and its effects. They only need to know the way that one signal leads to another and the dog makes predictions. So that you don't need all the detail. They don't need to know the specific words. They just need to know what serves them in order to train the dog that's right there in front of them. And so when we make content and we then post it, our peers could be like, that's not right. But it maybe what we're saying is functionally correct for the explanation to the lay person that we're looking to say, hey, I did this for this dog. If you have a similar dog, I can do the same. It doesn't need to be so tightly specific that like it's accurate that your peers would agree with what you're saying. They need to observe your work, go, yeah, like the dog has changed, whatever. But then that kind of leads us into the problem of how on earth do we observe someone's work and make any kind of judgment against the relative success that they're achieving, considering we don't always know what their measure of success is to the client, right? And I think that's one of the tricky parts as well, is like it could be something that the client might care very deeply about, something that average people don't care about at all. You know what I mean? Like I've had clients that have got me around because the dog pisses on a particular, like there was this guy, I'll never forget, had this like bird feeder statue thing. It was really important to him. His dog had started pissing on it and he didn't want the dog to piss on it anymore. And that was the dog training. And there were other issues with the dog, you know, like when I'm around, I'm like asking him about the dog and various things. None of it did he care about. None of it. It was just that I don't want my dog pissing on that thing. It actually was more complicated than that. It was not his dog. It was his new partner's dog who had moved in. You know, like it was complex sort of thing. But the wants and needs of the client was so hyper specific that if I were at that time making like, look, I'm going to train this dog to do things, you might be like, hey, but what about the clear anxiety that dog is feeling? And you're like, yeah, that's cool, but I'm being paid to tell the dog not to piss on this particular piece of furniture because that's what the client wants. The other stuff, I'm trying to convince the client that they should work on these sorts of things. That's a particular, like they can improve the life of their dog, but the advice that they have come to me for is how to avoid this. And so I think that's part of the bigger picture of like, we never really know what is the exact outcome that we're working towards. The other thing is as well, this is one of the things that, like in terms of, say with working dogs, one of the things that I was told really early on, I'm sure you'd agree with this, is like if you're assessing a dog either to purchase or to breed from or anything like that, you can watch a video of it work someone. That's cool. That's an interesting data point that we can like make some assumptions about from there. But unless you've worked the dog personally, you don't really know the information that you need to know to make an assessment of the dog. And the example I'll use in that regard is like, I remember one time working a dog in front of a crowd of people and it was a leg dog and it bit me in the back of the leg. And the bite looked good. And to the crowd of people who were watching, the dog was doing great. Like everyone's like, yeah, that dog's really good. But to me, I can feel the dog's grip shifting when I made eye contact with it, right? So like I know when I looked back and that dog looked me in the eye, I could feel the discomfort. I could feel the grip shifting just from me making eye contact with the dog. Now the dog didn't let go. The dog continued to, from the observation of the people who couldn't see the eyes of the dog and could not feel the grip of the dog, nothing changed, right? Everything was exactly the same. But to me, the actual person doing it, I received like critical data in that moment that gave me the ability to assess the dog in a completely different way that the people just watching from the other side could never imagine to have that information, right? So imagine that via video is times a million. Like you don't know what's going on with the dog.
Yeah, true.
All that we have is the ability to sort of read the body language of the dog. And then we're faced with the difficulties of, you get some dogs that are just slinky kind of dogs. Like for sure, there's been like, you know, you see some Kelpies that are just like, the way they move is they're slinky. Their tail is kind of always tucked and they always sort of lengthen and extend their body and they've always got their head pinned back and their eyes forward. And if you saw that from a Malinois, you'd be like, oh my God, something really horrible has happened to that dog, right? Because why are you carrying yourself that way? Like, why is your body language so terrible? But that can just be how some dogs like to move around because that's how they are, you know?
Well, that's what
like
Kelpies do when they're stalking sheep is they're eye dogs.
Exactly.
They keep down low and they keep their center of gravity down low so they can maintain eye contact with the sheep. That's how they watch their behavior and watch what direction they're going to flag next so they can quickly cut them off. So that's
Exactly.
characteristic of a breed.
Exactly. But we see that, like I've certainly observed plenty of Kelpies who have never seen a sheep in their fucking life doing that exact same stalking behavior over something in the environment that you don't know necessarily what it is that sheep, that Kelpie is in his mind rounding up in that moment.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? Like he thinks that he's causing effect onto something. You don't necessarily know what that is. And like a moment, a snapshot in time, you look at that dog and go, oh, that dog's fearful. That dog is X, Y, Z. And you could come up with all these descriptors that are just completely wrong because that's how that dog was acting in that moment, in that slice of time because of something that was off screen that you don't know about, right? So I think that's sort of the tricky part. And all these are the caveats to preface this conversation by saying this is a very difficult thing to assess. When you're looking at anybody's work online, you are only looking at what they decided to show you. You're not looking at the truth. That is absolutely not the case. And I use the same example all the time. I'm sure that people listening to the podcast have heard me say it, but there was a video I put up one time of my own dog. He's between my legs and I tell him to get on the mill and he like dives onto the mill, rides it to the end, lets it shoot him off the end, does like almost like a handstand turn on his feet, jumps back on the mill, it slides and he just kind of has to only take a couple of backward steps and ends up presenting himself kind of perfectly right in front of me, ready to do some work, ready to be clipped up. And it's this really cool video. And I posted it, right? Because I thought, oh, look how cool this looks. And then I'm out with a client a couple of days later and things are going wrong with their dog, as what happens in training. She sort of expresses her dismay and she's so disheartened that the training isn't going the way that she'd want. The dog's not being as successful as she'd like it to be in this moment, and says, like your dog never gets anything wrong. I saw that video you put up and I was like, let me show you some other fucking takes of the same session, because we were doing that in the session. That's what we were doing, getting on and off the mill in that way. And I was teaching him how to do it. And of course, there were ones where he shot straight off the back of the mill, or the ones where he got on and then overshot it and slammed into me and the two of us fall on the floor. Like it was a fuck fight. But I only posted the good one. I didn't post it all of the like, look how difficult this was to teach. That's not what I was showing. I was just like, look, I captured this cool thing. Put that to music, away it goes, right? So we're all full of shit. We're all showing the work that we want people to see in order to demonstrate the skill set or the capability or the thing that we're trying to sell in that moment. Like the thing that we're telling people, we can provide you with this. That's what we're showing, right? So I think all of that is the caveat that we kind of have to acknowledge and accept and put out front before we start talking about, sometimes we see some shitty dog work online. And in order to assess that it's shitty dog work, there's a lot that has to go into that to understand whether you agree with someone's work, whether it's good work, bad work, other work, or whatever.
Mate, there's been times where I've looked at people's work online and I can tell that that's where their current level of knowledge is. There's been attempts where I've reached out to them and said, would you like some advice on what I've just seen? I would say probably more overwhelmingly, yes. People have said, yeah, absolutely. I would love to get some advice off you. I'm glad that people are seeing this as an opportunity to teach me something I don't know. And there's been other times where people have said, no, get fucked. Why would I want to hear from you? Which that's fair enough because it's just an offer. It's not an insistence. And I've had the same thing. People have reached out to me before and said, hey, can I point out something to you? And I said, yeah, sure. And they've said, you put up this image of your Roddy doing this. Why did you do that? Or, have you thought about this? Or what's the outcome? Or whatever the conversation is. There could be a myriad of different conversations that I have with people locally and across the world when they're generally inquisitive or offering what they think is assistance at the time. Some is welcomed, and sometimes I just hear people out and think, yeah, well, that's not what I'm doing. And it's further away from the interpretation I was trying to provide. However, what you were talking about before reminded me of this way back when YouTube was in its very early conception. There was this guy that he was suggesting that if he read one page of a book, he could tell you the outcome of that entire book. In many situations, he could. Like somebody could read him a page of a book. It could be a new book. It could be whatever. But it was a scam. This guy was a speed reader, and that's literally all he did is he just read books. So he just fucking cycled through books and he could speed read through books and all the popular books that he thinks that people would pick. So somebody cottoned onto it and they got these like bohemian artisan sort of books from different cultures and so forth. And we're saying, okay, here's this book. He's going, yeah, what's this book? You could just tell immediately it was a discomfort. So it wasn't him promoting himself. It was this other guy promoting him as a scammer and shutting him down and saying, this is how he does the trick. I cottoned onto it quickly because he's a speed reader. And he goes, I've been watching this guy for a while and he's trying to impress upon all these people that he's, like the next Jesus Christ of doing these sort of skills. And he said, but it's a trick. So he said, what we did was we got all of these different unique style of books and he couldn't predict the outcome. And we basically exposed him. But the point to this is sometimes when people are showing you their work, how can you predict the end if all of you've seen is one page of the book? That's something that you've got to take into consideration sometimes as well, because there's sometimes where people have asked me and they've been kind about it. It hasn't been an argument or people setting me up for, like a fall or something like that. But people have asked me questions and said, like, what is this or what did you do that for? Or there was an exercise I put up where Mando was inside. I was sitting in a chair and I was giving him commands while he was on his bed, and I was asking him to do a sit, and then I repeated the word sit, which he did, and I asked him to do a stand, and I repeated the word stand, and then we just went through some random exercise where I was asking him to do doubles. And somebody said, why all those doubles? And I said, what I'm asking of him is, do you know this exercise well, or will you panic in this sort of situation when I say stand again and then attempt to do another exercise? And I said, I want to know that he knows it well enough and has confidence in the exercise that when I ask him to perform, and he goes, yeah, I'm doing that. I'm in that position. I'm not going to move from that position. Mission accomplished. I got what I wanted. And FYI, there was a couple of takes of that before I put the one up that actually worked properly, because there were a couple of ones where he did fuck it up. But it was teaching, and somebody said that to me. They said, was this the first attempt you did it? And I was honest. I said, no, it wasn't the first attempt at the exercise. I said it was the third attempt that I put up. And they said, oh, I would have liked to have seen how you rectified it. And I said, yeah, good point. I probably should have played it through to fruition. Primarily, the way I rectified it was just reset him and also not reward him for doing it. Like just reset him for the behavior. And I said, had I identified at that point in time, because it's a shaping and chaining style of exercise, that the chain was broken, I'd have to go back and reshape things individually to get confidence back in those certain types of exercises. But from my knowledge and experience, I could see that he could work through this okay, just understanding that, I've made a mistake. I had some verbal punishes in place, some marker punishments that he understood. I was just working him through that process carefully. And then by the third attempt, he went, yep, got it. Here it is. Here's the finished product. He pulled it off without a problem. But yeah, I understand. I said that probably would have been interesting. And I said, I also share in your point as well that I like to see people's work as well when something isn't going wrong, because that's how I learn from them. If there's something that's interesting to me and I don't know how they quite did it, I like to see how they broke it down and how they pull that chain apart and they go through the shaping process if problems or anomalies start to present themselves. So when I am watching other people's work, and there's always trainers that I'm looking at their work, and, if they're not just doing constant healing all the time, I am interested in seeing, like different formats of things that they're doing when they're doing downstays or places or recalls or middles or, like transitioning from middle to front to heel positions. And then there's a lot of things that I like to see. How are you shaping this behavior, which is mostly through luring? How are you rewarding the dog? What type of rewards are you using? Are you using food and then finalizing onto a toy? What are you doing? So yes, I do like to see the breakdown. I like to see when people go into a bit more deep diving rather than just saying, hey, look at me, I'm doing a healing pattern. And here's another healing pattern. Here's another healing pattern. And here's something that the dog does super, super well, which is a healing pattern. And it's another healing pattern. And here's another healing pattern with a healing pattern on top of a healing pattern, which there's some people that do some impressive healing out there. And I look at it, but after I've seen 5 healing patterns off the person, I don't want to see anymore, because I'm thinking that's your gig. That's your thing, is dressing up nice and doing healing patterns. And power to you. You've got a gig and you've got people roped in on that, and that's your thing, and that's what you're good at showing people how to do. But moving on, I'm interested in other things as well. Like, I've received some acclaim and I've received some criticism of people who say, why would you do that? You should be beyond that. Or why are you fucking around with this? Or why would you do that silly thing with your dog, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes I say, yeah, fair enough. Or sometimes I say just for shits and giggles, whatever it might be. And you have said before, Pat, which I liked and I agreed with, that if you put something out there, then you're open to criticism about it. You know, but I think also the criticism should be fair criticism, constructive in some format. I've seen some criticism lately that people have put out on other trainers and so forth, which is, it's gone from being a form of criticism into a form of absolute abuse. The wordage that they're using has crossed the line into a defamatory state. That's human nature in some cases. Some people aren't very charitable and they've got black hearts, and there is actually evil people out there who are just like that. Whereas there's other good people out there, and I've been fortunate enough to hold an audience or a court with those people where they've been kind enough to offer solutions or guidance or mentoring or whatever it be. And just because I've had, whatever time I've had in the industry, I have absolutely owned the point before that there is nothing that I am beyond being shown. I still make mistakes. There's still times where I underthink or overthink or poorly prepare something, and people have said, hey, why would you do it that way? Why haven't you considered this? And I said, because I missed a step. Thank you. I appreciate you picking me up on it. So I welcome that, and I welcome having that sort of person around me, because that's not a person who's just a piece of shit. That's actually a person who shows integrity, cares, and is actually on their way to becoming, if they're not already, a good trainer themselves.
Yeah. So swinging back to what we wanted to talk about in terms of like the experience of the dog, right? So we've sort of cleaned up the people giving feedback, appropriate or not, invited or not, warranted or not. But I think now, talking about the experience of the dog, I think that this is what really draws the line between how someone will train or how they'll identify as a trainer and what they'll actually ultimately do. Is we all have a different interpretation as to the experience of a dog in any given moment, and also what is worse, whether it's long-term, low-level anxiety or very short-term, very intense fear, pain, anxiety, whatever. Like how you would train a dog and what you would consider effective training, I think can be very individual depending on your own life experiences, your own education, and how you would like to be treated. And I think that what we find is that kind of trickles down to the way that people then train a dog and the way that people will interpret the way that somebody else trains a dog, right? So I think, like, as an example, at the highest level, you and I, we're balanced trainers. I've got no issue with using pain compliance when I have to. So like if it comes to it, the thing that I need to motivate a dog to not do something or to do something, there are times where I'm like, yeah, I'm totally fine with using pain compliance to do that. And there are people who would never, ever do that, right? Like they would never cross the line of doing that. And now me and those people, like we really are going to separate, right? Like, so that's kind of our highest level decision-making process is like, are we going to use any tools of aversion or compulsion whatsoever? If we've separated at that point, it's unlikely that we can agree on anything else because I'm willing to do that and somebody else is not. Now, I think that what we for sure see is that some of the people who are not willing to do that then make the assumption that if you are willing to use aversive tools, like pain compliance, because that's the reality. That's the words that nobody wants to use, but that's the reality of it, right? Like if you're using negative reinforcement, if you're using punishment, very often what you're doing is pain compliance. And pain compliance is a word that, or a couple of words that gives people different feelings, you know? Like, can you remember the first time you ever heard that word pain compliance and the context that it was in? If you do, I think it would be similar to me. I can remember mine was when I was in the army. It was the early days of being in the army on my close quarter fighting course, right? A CQF course. And it was talking about like maneuvering someone with an armbar on. I remember it being explained to me. I can't even remember what it was, but it was like some kind of armbar and it was moving like a person from here to here.
Yep.
And the explanation was you put the armbar on when you're going to move them, but you don't put the pressure on, right? So it's on. And if they want to get funny on the move, then you can use pain compliance on the way. And that's the first time. That was, to me, that was the first time I ever heard the word pain compliance. And in that context, I was like, because I need this person to do something. And if they don't, I can apply pain to them until they do, right? And in a military context like that, nobody's shying away from the term pain compliance, right? Like nobody's doing that. But in the dog space, that term pain compliance, exactly as you just sort of alluded to, it's like swearing. That's the worst thing in the fucking world that you could possibly do to anybody ever. And to me, I'm like, no, but that's actually like the real world. Like that's actually how the real world works.
Can I just add there, like in the use of force continuum, that's quite low in the use of force continuum. Like when you're talking about the use of pain compliance in moving, in crowd control, in moving somebody, that's in low steps of the use of force. Like then you start getting into striking and then potential lethal force. Like you're getting into higher echelons and categories of stopping the offense.
Yeah, exactly, right? So when you're standing for a really long period of time, and then you're like, oh, fuck, I'm sick of doing this. I'm going to sit down. That's pain compliance. You like, oh, this behavior that I'm doing has become uncomfortable. It's getting to the point where I want that discomfort to stop. So I will seek out an alternative behavior that will hopefully remove that discomfort. And so you're standing for too long and then you sit down and then you go that the aversive situation you've put yourself in of standing for too long and causing that pain to build up is relieved and you are reinforced for sitting in that moment.
I agree with you entirely, but your mates out there, your mates, not mine, will say that you're just using verbiage and trickery.
Yeah. Well, but this is the thing. I have for sure stood for long periods of time till I've been really, really sore, right?
Yeah.
And then I sit down or I lay down and I'm comfortable again. But then the next day when my body's recovered and everything's fine, I'm not afraid of standing, right?
Yeah,
like I'm not.
That's a good analogy. That's a good point.
Yeah.
But it's still trickery, Pat Stewart. You're just using your impressive verbiage. You're just you're verbaling people. You're just tricking them.
Yeah. So I'm aware then if I were to stand for too long, it could become uncomfortable and I would have to sit. But it's kind of not a real concern for me because like I know I can do that. Right. And so I'm happy to stand because I know when this becomes uncomfortable, I can change my position. I can sit or I can do whatever and I will be able to avoid the discomfort, the pain, whatever it is.
I can tell you for a fact, to use your example, there are times when I used to work on doors at pubs and so forth where I have armbarred people and taken them out in proper pain compliance where, like they're asking me to relieve the pressure. And when they're behaving themselves as a reward, I do so. I show respect to them when they're showing respect to me and I take them out and we have our instructions at the door and say, go home, or there are further penalties that apply or further punishes that apply, such as you won't be able to come back here for a certain period of time if you do this, that, or the other. And to use your example before, the following week, the same person that I dragged out of the pub comes over and shakes my hand and says, sorry, mate, I was out of line. I promise I won't do that again. And I shake their hand and I say, yep, no worries, mate. Just keep it under wraps, please, and go and enjoy yourself. And don't have any problems with them. And also become an ally because they've had a form of education. They've understood. It wasn't a point where, like I'm breaking their arm or snapping their wrist or anything like that as I'm taking them out. It's a lesson. It's just, hey, mate, you're out of control. This is to stop me from getting hurt by you and to keep you under control, and also to deliver a message and a lesson to you about what to do next time you come back here.
Yeah, right. So measure that against like your maths teacher, right? In one circumstance, it's like, hey, this is for an effect, right? Like there was a cause, that's your behavior, right? You were in the bar or you're the dog that's doing the not allowed thing. You're pissing on the thing that we don't want the dog to, whatever it is, right? It doesn't matter. There's a cause that has this effect. And if you don't do that cause, you don't get that effect. But also there's other shit going on. There's a relationship elsewhere. And I think this is one of the things, like, this is like when we talk about punishment, we often use the sort of police pulling you over as an example, like for the classic speeding type example. And at the end of it, there's that reconciliation where the cop goes like, hey, have a nice day. And it's that me and you are not enemies. Like this had to happen. We had to have this aversive consequence for your behavior. But now that we've done that,
it's over.
Me and you're good. And like what the cop is telling to you in that moment, when you get your speeding ticket and he says, have a nice day, is what he's saying is, I'm on your side. Like you did the wrong thing and you have to learn not to do that because it's dangerous and you're putting everybody at risk. But we've had this interaction where you're in trouble from me and I'm telling you that. But when I get back into my car and we both drive off, if somebody T-bones you at the next intersection, I'm coming to help you. We're not enemies. I'm not against you. I don't have any issue with you. It's that you did the wrong thing. Now you have to suffer the consequence so that you learn not to do that thing. But the moment that that's done, we carry on. And in the next circumstance, I might be your savior. I might be the reason you get to live. It's not that I think poorly of you or want bad for you. It's that you had to learn from the outcomes of your behavior. So I think that's what gets missed. And so at our highest level, when we're talking about the experience of the dog, some people, their own life experiences tell them that the dog should never be put into a difficult situation or an uncomfortable, painful, aversive situation. And then others will be like, no, there's times that that's okay. And so if you're sort of rigidly like, if it's binary, it's very difficult for those people to communicate, right? Like, and that's what we see typically is when we get force-free, like extremist people, you can't really have a conversation with them because they're not reasonable. But we have this in the opposite direction as well, right? Like we see people exactly like your maths teacher that you said tormented you and was just abusive. Like there's dog trainers that do the same shit.
Absolutely.
Right? Like there's
absolutely.
There's both ends of there's turds at both ends of the spectrum here.
Yep.
Right.
And we should have the confidence to advocate getting rid of them. You know, like those people do need to be removed from teaching children or teaching dogs or teaching humans or whatever.
Yeah. So my experience kind of is like once you're dealing with a person who is on the fringe, right? Like it doesn't matter which end of the spectrum they're at. If they're at the end of either of them, you can't really communicate very well with those people, right? And the further that somebody comes in from the edges, the more able we are to communicate with them. So even if a person is just a few notches in from the left, they're going to have a more tenable conversation than a person who is just with a person who's a few notches in from the right, then they are going to have with somebody who's like more central with an extremist. You know what I mean? Like, so what I'm saying is there are people who like, it's never okay to do either, right? To use positive reinforcement is never going to work, or to use any form of compulsion punishment is only abuse. Those people we can't really have a conversation with. Unfortunately, they're the commenters, right? Like they're the people who give you the most feedback, right? They're the people whose lives are usually so shitty that they need to express that constantly to other people.
That reminds me of this meme I just saw literally yesterday with some girl fucking up, you know, like she's a major sporting pole vaulter for like Olympic level and she fucked up something. And there's this fat guy with this enormous belly with food sitting on his belly where he's lying on the couch. He goes, huh, what a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And that's the people who are telling us, you know, how to train dogs at home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So that's what we face is that sometimes we can't have these conversations. But now, so we've acknowledged that. We've been through that. We're done with the extremes. We can stop talking about that and now talk about people who like will go left and right on a similar topic.
Before you do that, can I ask you a question? What's your thoughts on when it's okay to use punishment with a dog? Like what do you determine from the students themselves?
To use punishment, to me, if I don't want to see a behavior again, I'm punishing it.
Yep.
Because I think that the word punishment has these certain connotations that it's about the outcome of the training, not the procedure of the training, right? Like I will punish a dog early and for many things, but punishment can take many, many forms, right? I constantly use similar examples. Like I will teach about punishment at an event or a workshop or whatever. And then usually the first time that I do punish a dog in a session, I usually look up and say to the crowd of people, who saw that? Like who noticed it? Usually there's only 2 or 3 people in a group of 50 that are like, oh, that's what you meant about like how to isolate and use negative punishment, right? Like that's what I did, right? Like we got rid of, we said to the dog, hey, that thing you just did, don't do it again. But we can say that in various ways, right? Like, and for sure, there are some people who believe that when I say I will punish a dog, they're imagining me helicopter, like putting on my Louis Vuitton tracksuit and helicoptering the dog, right? But here's the problem, and we've talked about this though, Glenn. Right? Now,
you can't pull that out and expect me not to have a fucking laughing fit about it.
But here's the thing, for sure, the tracksuit wearer puts himself in a position regularly to have to do that. But mate, if there were a camera following me all the time when I've trained a dog, there would be footage of me doing similar shit because I'm not getting bitten. Like when I have a real serious dog that somebody has through numerous years of bullshit has turned the dog into a redirecting dangerous dog. And when they call me and ask me if I can help, when that dog redirects on me, I'm not just letting him bite me, right? So I'm not helicoptering and slamming the dog into the ground, but I'm going to fucking control that dog.
Yeah,
and sometimes and sometimes having to control a dog that is intent on biting you, or really like worse yet, is the kind of dog that is willing and capable to see that through to the end. Like,
and it's also rewarding if they get to do the outcome as well. They keep perpetually learning that this pays for me. I can win by doing this, and I have done in the past. So you're just another notch on my belt, mate.
Yeah. So if that dog comes at me with that intent, I'm doing whatever it needs to do to not lose that fight. I'm going home to my kids against that fucking dog,
oath.
right? Like that, and no reasonable person is saying anything other than that, right? And the people who then would listen to something and be like, no, you should never give a dog any. You're not dealing with real dogs. If you think that I'm like, when somebody is like, hey, there's a huge problem with this dog, can you our options are to euthanize it, or if you can get it under control, can you give it a go? In the process of getting that under control, if that dog comes to me, chances are, which is highly likely to happen in that kind of circumstance, chances are now we have to have that play out so I can show the dog that's not going to go the way that you want it to go. I'm not just going like, oh, well, this is how I die, right? Like that's what has been implied is what you have to do in those circumstances if the dog comes up the line, right? And of course they say, oh, you should never be in that situation. But like somebody has to. If somebody else has created this problem, how many times, mate, have you been in the position where you can go, yeah, I know how to fix this. It's going to be super fucking dangerous for me. And chances are this dog is going to go through some shit, but he's only 3 and he's going to have, 12 more good years after this. And so we can have a really rough day today and then we can carry on, or you can euthanize the dog and then it's fucking final and that's the end of it, right? Like to me, I'm like, hey, let's do it. But here's the thing. This is what I want to sort of get to is like, once we're talking reasonable people, every single person's thoughts and emotions and how they will play out the amount of aversive when, where, and how much they think a dog can handle is such an individual thing. And to me, I know of myself, right? And that's really all that anybody knows is themselves. It is, I would way rather have a problem fixed than sit in the stress and anxiety of the problem for an extended period of time, right? But that's how my brain works. So like, recently, for anybody that's ever come to me with an emotional problem, I'm emotionally very stunted, right? And so like people have come to me for support, like, I just need your help. I just need your empathy in this situation. I'm like, hey, I'm a problem solver. If you're looking for someone to wargame this, if you're looking for someone to help you find the solution and put into action the thing that will get you out of this situation, I'm your fucking guy, right? I will unemotionally dissect this for you, come up with a plan and help you implement it. But if you're looking for someone just to sit in the pit of despair with you, I'm not good at that because I constantly want to solve the problem. That's just how my brain works. I want to solve the problem. So that results in me as a trainer. When I look at a dog and I look and go, hey, that dog's got an issue, right? He's afraid of other dogs. He's reactive. He's got separation anxiety. He's afraid of an inanimate thing. Like whatever the problem, if there's a slow burn discomfort that dog is in, to me, when I look at that, I feel compelled to fix it. Like I look at the dog and I'm like, hey, I don't want you feeling that way because I wouldn't want to feel that way. I wouldn't want to be simmering at low levels of anxiety. That fucks me up. I really dislike that feeling. And so I would rather of myself, I'm like, let's confront this. Let's go through this problem. And people will know it. Like if I have an issue with someone I care about, I will confront the issue. Say me and you, if I thought you had wronged me in some way, I would immediately confront you. I don't want the discomfort of like, oh, maybe Glenn's fucking me around. Is he? I would be like, hey, are you fucking doing this? Right. And then you would say yes or no and we hash it out. Right. Yep. Because I can't handle that low level simmering anxiety over something. I hate that shit. And so that informs the way that I will train with a dog. For sure, there's a mix of personality traits in dogs, right? Like there are dogs that would appreciate that. I think that if they had the cognition and the ability to explain it, there are some dogs that are like, no, let's get this fixed. Let's get this over with. Whatever I have to do to get this, I don't want to feel like this ever again. So even if that means we have to turn up the dial to 11 for 10 minutes and I will feel these feels worse than I've ever felt them and never again, that's the choice I'll make. There are dogs who want that for sure. And then there's other dogs that are like, no, that's way too much for me. I could never handle that. I would rather sit at this low level. then that's a different training modality. But I think that as people, we can only really understand how we feel about things. And that's how I feel about things. That's why I'm a balanced trainer. I'll never be anything other than that, because the idea, when I look at somebody who's doing low level counter conditioning for 6 months and they're approaching the trigger over and over. And then this is one of the things we hear about, like in those kind of circles, the low level, the counter conditioning circles. They're like, oh, well, you can, like if you're using food to counter condition something and the dog starts to get weird feelings about food, the conditioning went the other way. And that's going to happen. Like you train for long enough around a trigger. Like if, we see this, we say like, okay, we're going to call the dog aggressive because there's an aggression issue, regardless of the reason, right? And we're going to do the slow burn counter conditioning. We're going to do like something that resembles bat. We're going to be continually approaching, throwing food on the floor, exposing the dog to the trigger. Then before too long, that dog is just like, in my opinion, the dog is then like, well, fuck my life. Like all we ever seem to do is things I hate doing at a very low level. Right? Whereas like I would rather be like, hey, we're going to do that thing that you hate doing. We're going to do it all the way through. We're going to really do it. And we're going to show you that you don't hate doing it. We're going to show you that it's not the thing that you think. We're going to change the way that you feel about it. We're going to push through the other side. And then the rest of your life is going to be fucking awesome. And so that's just my choice. That's how I want to approach things. It's how I do things with myself. And I'm drawn to the type of dog and the type of training that is the way to do it. Now, that's not all dogs. And for sure, there's dogs that I approach and I'm like, oh, no, this is the slow burner. This is one of those kind of dogs, right? There's times where we do that. But to me, what I think is the most aversive thing that I can imagine is to feel helpless, and especially for a long period of time. Like that to me is the worst thing that I can imagine.
Well said.
And feeling helpless at all is horrible. But to be helpless kind of for your life and to be in management like for your life, like I can't imagine a worse hell than that. To me, that would be living in fucking hell. I could not imagine that feeling. So I would rather regain the initiative. And that's why the type of training that we do, while it might involve aversives, it gives control to the dog.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's what I want.
Yeah.
Is control. Where we say to the dog, like, hey, like there's consequences to your actions and you can choose that. That's up to you. You can make those choices. And when we have that level of autonomy, that is empowering. And when people want to talk about like desensitized counter condition kind of stuff, what we're often like we see people doing is like, hey, there's your trigger and here's a treat. There's your trigger, here's a treat. There's your trigger, here's a treat. Fine. Eventually the dog goes, there's my trigger, give me my treat, right? And maybe eventually we turn around how the dog, oh, there's my trigger. That announces the treat. But like real counter conditioning to me is where we go, that's not your trigger. You're not fucking afraid of that. That's not a thing. Like you are better than this. You are stronger than this. You don't need to worry about that. And of course, there's moments where we like have to do the counter conditioning. Like we're still doing all the same kind of shit. But what we're making sure that we give the dog is like these freedom of choices and like understanding where boundaries are and consequences, and then being able to make choices through, like navigate those boundaries, navigate those consequences, the positive consequences, the negative consequences, navigate them in a way that gives you autonomy and shows you like if you do these particular things, your life goes a particular way. And when you learn that, make the choices about how you want your life to go. Now that dog is empowered and that dog then starts to make good choices that lead to the outcomes that we've shown the dog is available to it. And that to me makes the kind of dog that I want to be around. And this is high on my mind because we're renovating at home, right? And we've just had 5 weeks of new builders in the house every day. And my 2 old dogs are experiencing these builders every day. And it's been really interesting to me to watch the builders dealing with my dogs because they're in and out of other people's houses all the time, right? And they're conscious of like, because I remember this when I was an apprentice, like you're working at a site with a dog, you're constantly in and out of a site, right? Like you're going out to your car to get tools and mix mud and doing all, you're pushing a wheelbarrow through the gate. If there's a dog on site, you're always worried because you're like, I can't have this fucking dog running away, right? Like I don't know this dog. I don't know anything about it. Even if it's friendly, you're concerned about the client's dog on site. And watching the builders fucking with my dogs was cracking me up. Like closing the gate and sort of, I watched this one guy, Remy followed him to the door and he was leaving my front door and he like opened it just a crack and kind of like shimmied himself through so Remy couldn't get out. And I was like, oh, mate, you can just leave that door open. It's fine. And he goes, oh, but the gate's open, so he'd be able to go to the street. I said, he ain't fucking going anywhere, mate. Like, he might walk out to your car with you. Like, he might go out and just see what you're up to, but he ain't going. Like, he's going to come back in with you. Like, I got like no issue. And I said to a couple of them, I was like, man, this dog's free in the building. He goes wherever he wants. Don't worry about him. He's going to follow you around. Val follows him everywhere. But what was interesting is they all fell in love with these dogs, right? And only a couple of them actually found out that I'm a dog trainer and that they're highly trained dogs, because it's not like I'm telling them to do anything, right? Like, they're just hanging out being cool dogs. But watching the way that these builders who have like a huge gamut of dogs, they're seeing different dogs all the time because they're going into all these different people's houses. They're having to deal with different dogs. Watching them deal with my dogs and some of the peculiar precautions that they were taking that are just 100% not necessary, like with my dogs. Because I'm like, no, these are highly trained dogs. They know how to live and they're going to live the way that they've been trained to live. And essentially, yeah, I'm very lucky. I mean, my dogs are old, but there's no management at my house currently, like zero management. I don't even have crates in the house. I've got kennels in the yard that it's pretty rare that the dogs would ever go in the kennels. But the dogs are just, they're dogs. They just do whatever, right? They're two old, highly trained dogs that just fucking hang around. And it was super interesting to me to just see the shock at the builders of how easy they were. And I had numerous conversations with people who didn't know I was a trainer. They're like, how'd you get these dogs like this? And I'm like, I just taught them. Like, I just taught them that when they do things I like, I tell them I like it. And when they do things I don't like, I tell them to stop it. Like, it's pretty fucking easy.
Isn't it nice when you get those inadvertent compliments from people? Like, they're just overwhelmed with how your dogs are doing something which we just think is a low-level behavior, but they're going, wow, fuck, how do you do that? Like, this is just amazing. And it leads into this whole orchestrated conversation about dogs, and they go, fuck, I wish my dog was like that. And you're just thinking, holy shit, that's like one of the easiest things that I've had to work on with the dogs. Listening to you giving your explanation before, which was fantastic. I was trying to tease it out of you before, but you answered it before about, like being able to confidently navigate your way through some of these problematic behaviors and then come out with clarity at the end. One of the terms that I express regularly when I had been training a lot of NDTF people, but even now when I'm working with private lessons, especially with people with problematic dogs, which seems to be my jam more and more and more. But one of the points that I keep reiterating there, which was told to me a long time ago, is that a student should feel better at the end of the lesson than they did at the beginning of the lesson. And that's not just about, like making friends and being kind. That's about navigating your way through confidently through a minefield of right and wrong behaviors and being able to carry yourself through that and say, hey, I learned something today. I feel good about this. Like I've been stepping on eggshells around all these things. I didn't have clarity. I didn't have consistency. I didn't have these, educational prompts. Now I've got them, and now I feel so much more enlightened about what I am supposed to do and who I am and how I exist in this space with you. And I think that, like if you were to Venn diagram it, which is those three circles that collide together to form some sort of pinnacle point, it could be things like control, confidence, and clarity with a midsection that equals happiness. Like you actually get some sort of divine purpose out of it where you think, I've had all of these opportunities through some form of education that have landed me here, and now I hear you. I actually hear you. I understand what you're supposed to do. So even though you might have used some sort of, to phrase what we were talking about before, some sort of pain compliance along the way, it only lasted for as long as the lesson need be. And then it went away. And it didn't happen again when I didn't exhibit those behaviors anymore. Therefore, I've learned something about today. So therefore, I feel better about the lesson. I feel that I understand myself, not just you, but I understand myself better. I understand what I'm supposed to do. I understand what my purpose is or isn't. And this is where the importance of your point before, Pat, where you were saying how people will carry this for 6, 12, 18, 24, 36 months down the track. And I am so on board with what you said there before, because I agree. I think that's anyone's personal hell. I think that when you are being dragged along and just spoon-fed just enough, and then, like you just don't know where you stand. You don't know where you sit with everything. And you still have all these feelings like, should I do this behavior? You're never really getting clarity on how to actually prevent or stop from doing the behavior. So you can just move on. Just move on and enjoy life so much better and say, all right, now I know. You watch documentaries all the time and you watch herds and mobs and prides and packs of animals all corresponding with each other. And it's the same way that you reiterated before about having a friendship with someone where you're saying, hey, you fucking with me? You see that amongst each other because they basically go up and go, hey, cut that fucking shit. And this is for your trouble. This is what happens for doing that. And knock it off because you're putting all of us at risk over your stupid, petulant, shitty, fucked up behavior. Knock it off. And then the member learns. They go, okay, that's what the boss is ruling out as a behavior. I'm not allowed to do this anymore. And if they don't, I've seen it in situations where I watched a zebra killing a young orphan calf or colt or whatever it was. Forgive me for my ignorance there, but the leader in the group came down and he turned around and he hoof kicked him in the head and killed him because he was crying out and he was bringing attention to lions. So he thought, this is it. This is how we deal with the situation. Extreme. And I'm not saying that's something that we do in dog training, but as an example of that, I saw other members of the herd going up and trying to console the little calf and trying to, bring him around and so forth. But he wasn't having anything of it because he couldn't find his mother. There were lions. It was in the Serengeti or somewhere like that. Again, I'm ignorant of exactly where it was, but there are examples not just of that, but all the way through life where the educators will try and teach you and then they will start upping the game because they're saying, hey, mate, you're not learning the lesson. Like I tried at a low point, and to use my example of the use of force continuum before, I tried at a low point. I tried to be present. I tried to come over and educate you. Hey, cut that out. You didn't listen to me, so I had to notch it up. You're still not listening to me, mate, so I'm going to have to bring it up another scale, okay? Finally, you're going to find a point. If you're a good teacher and your student is at that level, you'll find the point where education is going to happen. And then, again, as you said before, a good case example with the police officer, the point is at the end of it, you just say, all right, it's done. The punishment side is over. Have a good day. We're back being human beings again. I'm going to tell a story on that because that reminded me of something in motorbiking because most motorcyclists don't like highway patrol. They kind of just see them as a ticket peddling machine. However, I remember assisting somebody at a crash site once, and Scott and I were first on the scene of an accident, and we were doing first aid to a rider who had done quite a mischief to themselves. Finally, the police turned up, and the police were asking me questions about the accident. What did I see? What did I do? And then the ambulance turned up and they were asking me questions as well. So we were just talking to them about, like what we were doing and handing the person over to them effectively. The lady police officer who turned up, she said, we all draw straws on who comes out here on Sundays because we're fucking sick and tired, and it gives me so much PTSD on scraping off bodies off the road from motorcyclists. And I thought, I hadn't actually thought of that, like how distressing that would be for some of these people and how anxious it actually makes them. And she said, yeah, I'm sick and tired of this. It makes me sick to my stomach having to think about coming down this road. It's not my favorite part of the job at all. Whereas I'm thinking, like they're probably sitting in the bushes rubbing their hands together thinking, oh, cool, I'm going to get a bunch of guys coming out, 10 kilometers over the speed limit. But in effectiveness, they're actually sick of people wrapping themselves around trees. That is a distressing, horrible situation for them. So it depends on the lens and the viewing angle that you're looking at on how you actually see a situation. So yes, it's very easy for people to be online and see some of these situations. I'm bringing it around. So they see these situations and they get a small page in the book. It's very easy for them to have a viewpoint in them, but they don't know the entire chapters and how to finish the story off or how the story was meant to be told, which is why social media can be so entertaining but also so devious, where it does become a point of defamatory discussion sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. The last thing that I wanted to say on this was, we've just said this whole thing about how sometimes observing the dog, we say it's, first of all, it's hard to determine what's really going on with the dog from a snapshot in time. You don't know this. You don't know whether the trainer caused that dog's body language in that moment or whether it turned up with that body language. You don't know what the dog has done. We don't know how aggressive that dog has been. There's so many things we don't know when we see a snapshot in time. But what I want to be careful to make sure people understand is I just said, I don't like the idea of simmering low-level discomfort. I would rather take it all in a short period of time. What is important to sort of keep in mind of that is does that discomfort need to exist at all? Right? Like that's one of the things that I think that also needs, that question has to be answered, because we see training, like I see somebody using a technique where the dog is very clearly having a rough time, right, during it, right? And sure, no worries for, you could say that generally the dog's training is going well, but in this particular thing we were teaching, the dog resisted and we had to go to a much more level of compliance or aversive to get the dog through that situation. It is a false equivalency to say, in order to get the dog to go onto this bed, we had to do this horrendous shit to him. That is not equivalent to saying the dog was trying to kill me and I had to do this shit
that's
to
a
him
good
in order
point.
to stop it. That is not the same fucking thing.
Yep.
So one thing that is always important to keep in mind is when we start saying, okay, like, yeah, I'm prepared. Like I'm willing to use pain compliance. Like I'm willing to say to the dog, this is the only fucking way it's going to go. And it's not going to go a different way. I sure as fuck am not doing that just to get the dog to sit straight. Like that's not how it works.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's right.
These are games of positive reinforcement. That's how you build these like flashy particular behaviors. And you can spice them up and use some, like, that's not to say that we're strictly force free in those moments. We spice them up. We bring in some negative reinforcement. We make it more fun. We give the dog some things to avoid, to like add some layers, some texture to the game. But in a lot of the things where we see balance trainers coming under fire, and certainly I've had numerous balance trainers in the past reach out to me and be like, hey, I'm under fire because of this. Can you support me? I am like, no, mate, you fucking deserve all the fire. I'm not a person that gets involved in people's online bullshit, but if I were, I would be on the other team to you, because what you have done there is what I would do to protect myself from that dog, not force that dog onto a fucking bed. And the equivalent across every fucking thing you can think of. We see people doing that kind of stuff. So that's the issue. Like I say, everybody makes their own choices about where that's going to land. And what makes something abuse in my mind is when it's a prolonged suffering that is avoidable. So prolonged suffering that is avoidable and doesn't have a purpose beyond the suffering itself. Like when you're doing something to a dog for the purpose of doing it rather than the outcome of what needs to come of it, like you're for sure that's abuse at that point, right? Like, but the specifics of that and where everybody's choices are different. People make different choices. And to sort of round out the whole conversation as to what we're talking about is it is very difficult to watch any one video of a dog and make an assessment of who that dog is, how that dog feels about anything beyond the immediacy there that you can see, which is not the whole picture. And we know that, like, this is one of the things that we constantly talk about when we talk like operant conditioning. Operant conditioning predicts the future. So what you are seeing now is not caused by now, it's caused by the past. So when you see somebody handling a dog, the handling of now is going to affect the video of the future.
Yep.
The handling of the past is what's creating the dog that we see right now.
Yeah, it's a very good point.
That's it. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, I think that's a great conclusion to the episode.
All right, that's it. Another episode, Canine Paradigm, done. As always, if you like what you hear, just like, rate, share, subscribe. Do it through whatever subscription service you download us from. Go to another one, do it there. Best way to support the show is to tell everyone you know about it. Go crazy, yell it out, listen to it. I'm noticing a bit of a trend in my old age. I'm a bit like
I can see Sweats in the background running around, doing a little acrobatics.
Yeah,
that's Jazz Whiting, everyone. If you're wondering who Sweats is, that's my love name for her.
Did you notice, like, when old men would walk around with their like little radio in their pocket, just playing? Like my dad will do that, right? Like my dad will have a
little AM wireless.
Yeah, little AM. Yes. I've caught myself numerous times just doing that with my phone, like in my pocket, playing, like, you know, I'm listening to a podcast or whatever, but not even using headphones anymore. Just like just
playing it out loud while it's sitting right next to your groin.
Yeah,
radiating your man stuff.
Yeah, well, at least I'm not Bluetooth connecting it to my brain directly.
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah.
So I've noticed that as in my old age, I've been doing that. And it turns out people are like, what are you listening to? And I tell them. And other people should do the same, right? They should be like just playing our podcast from in their pocket. Just don't use headphones. Headphones are for chumps. If you're on the bus, If you're in a group of people, just put your phone on maximum volume and let the podcast play. That's the best way for you
Go
to
into a
support the
public
show.
library. They're always impressed with things like that.
Yeah, they love it.
Yeah,
Like,
they
I
do.
think if you're going to a library to do it, you should probably use a speaker. Like
A Bluetooth
big
speaker. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Get one of those
yeah.
JBL boom boxes.
Yeah.
Just set it up. Set it up in the middle of a book somewhere and just like be across.
Hide it.
Make a
Hide
game
it.
of
Yeah,
it.
put it
Make a
on a
game.
shelf.
Make a
Yeah.
game of it. Yep.
Yeah. Hide it somewhere in the library and then just blare the Canine Paradigm. Imagine that just nonstop in the library. Every just play that bit. Anyway, so that's the best way to support the show. If you wanted to financially support us, you could give us money. You can do that through Patreon. A few bucks a month, get you a giant backlog of information.
Well,
as well as new
the
stuff
government's
going
doing their best to take 47% of it, as you pointed out last time.
They don't even thank us.
No,
They just,
not
like,
one bit. They're just here. We're robbing the rich to give to the poor.
Have you noticed that our Prime Minister doesn't even bother trying to hide his contempt for the people anymore?
No,
like
it's just like,
hates
fuck
everybody in the
Fuck
country. And
you.
it's just
Fuck
like,
this country.
fuck
Fuck
you.
you. Yeah,
Fuck you, I'll do what I want.
Yep. It's amazing. Like you watch the UK Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, the New Zealand Prime Minister, and the Canadian Prime Minister. They're all in league with each other. Like it's the Five Eyes, I think they called them in the Marxist Revelations or something like that. But yeah, there's complete contempt for the people. It's just like, fuck you. We're going to tax your spare bedrooms. We're going to take as much money off you as we possibly can. Anything that's absurd that would lose us the election next time, we're doing it this round because you gave us another opportunity to do it. So fuck you. We're taking as much off you as you possibly can, you miserable, spineless bastards.
Yep. So support us on Patreon. If you want to get in touch with us, get some t-shirts as well. Get in the spring. There's links in the show notes. If you want to learn cool stuff about dog training, buy my online course. If you want to keep your dog really healthy, get some Canine Pharmaceuticals.
Two great things right there. Your course,
exactly.
Narelle's products. Great.
Exactly.
Yep.
If you want to get in touch with us, best way to do that is jump in the Facebook discussion group. Thousands of people just being cool together in there. But if you want to get in touch with us directly, you can shoot us an email. We are info@thecanineparadigm.com. Love you all. Goodbye. This is the bit. Play that bit. No.
In the library, yeah. Bang it on. Don't forget to hide the boombox though.
And then restart it.